Hey, what's going on, everybody? I have Chris Anderson here. He covers West Virginia. He's a publisher at EerSports and the 24/7 Sports Network. I wanted to bring him on because I want to talk about Jahmile Addae, former player at West Virginia and coach, as well as new transfer Daryl Porter Jr., cornerback there. Okay, Chris, what's going on, man?
Not a whole lot. Thanks for having me on. I'm sorry you get the blank background. Had to borrow my wife's area, and I wanted to get that dirty UNC stuff off the walls, so didn't want that up behind me.
There you go. No big deal. As long as we can hear you. Yeah, that's where we're looking for here. Get some good insight. Let's start with Coach here. What do you just, he was a standout player. I want to start there, a 4-year starter there in the secondary at West Virginia. Let's talk about him as a player. What do you remember about him? What kind of player was he?
He was an attacking kind of defensive back, loved to hit people, loved to go after the ball. That's what really stands out. When you say Jahmile Addae, you say West Virginia, that's what Mountaineer fans think of, is him just attacking. And I do think it at least somewhat transfers over to the way he coaches as well. So, yeah, he is kind of a ball hawk, attacking kind of secondary guy.
Yeah, and just looking at the pass deflections was well noted with him. Like you said, the ball hawking ability, his tackles were great too. So then, his coaching career, it's been very interesting. So he gets a GA spot there at West Virginia, then moves on, Michigan, Cincinnati, Arizona, Minnesota, then comes back to West Virginia for a couple years in 2019 and 20. What kind of coach was he? What stood out those 2 seasons there with the Mountaineers as a defensive back coach at with having all that experience coming into it?
Well, he kind of stepped in, and it was a strange situation for him, at least that last year, where right before the season started, the defensive coordinator, Vic Koenning, ran into some trouble with some disagreements with players, some accusations from players that some turned out to be unfounded, some turned out to be true, and eventually he just walked away. So right before the season, West Virginia suddenly had to figure out, how do they make this defensive coordinator position work? Because they didn't have somebody on staff. And what they did was they essentially split up the defense between Jordan Leslie, who was the defensive line coach, and Jahmile Addae, who was the cornerbacks coach. And honestly, when it happened, I said, there's no way this can work. It's already so difficult to call defenses, to plan defenses, to make game plans when there's one coach who has an idea, who has a thought. And now you have 2 different coaches, probably conflicting styles. We hadn't seen either of them really coach at West Virginia, Leslie had been there before, but didn't know his style, didn't know what he wanted to run as a defense. So I didn't think it would work. And amazingly, the 2 made it work. And the secondary was great. A couple of guys blossomed in that first year, including his cousin, Alonzo Addae, who was in his first year as a starter. And I believe that was the year they finished top 10, top 20 in a lot of categories defensively around the nation, and did that all while still having a lot of young guys on the roster. So it was kind of amazing what the 2 of them were able to accomplish together, and Addae deserves a lot of credit for that.
What stands out in particular about those? Maybe it has to do with the way he played, but maybe the style of the secondary, and certainly 2020, obviously it's well known they lead the country in pass defense, only 150 yards a game that second season, but just maybe style of play that you noticed from the secondary there?
Well, they do drop back into a lot of zone kind of coverages with their defense, but I think when I say the word zone, I think maybe your typical fan hears that and says, oh, it lays back, it hangs back, kind of leaving open spaces and more of a passive defense. But somehow it's not. It's a zone defense that's aggressive. And I think that's where it's different than a lot of maybe secondaries that you see out there and what Addae likes to run.
Is there something that you remember, points of emphasis, things he stresses as a coach that he talked about, like, look, these guys have to do this? Was there something that stood out to you that way with his coaching philosophy?
Well, I think I don't want to repeat myself here, but because we saw it after he left, we saw the opposite of it after he left, of being attacking in that secondary and not being complacent, not letting your guy, not waiting until the guy catches the ball to then hit him, to try to meet the man at the ball. That was something he really stressed. And West Virginia was really good at that. One of the top, as you noted, one of the top pass defenses in 2020. Took a step back last year. They had a lot of the guys coming back that were good the year before. And the issues that they had in that secondary this year in 2021 were the fact that they would let players kind of hang back. It was that passive zone defense instead of the aggressive zone defense, and would let guys make catches and then try to make a tackle.
Was there a player or even a couple that you felt like really elevated their game with coach there? Either was kind of an afterthought, either in recruiting or maybe his role before coach got there, that you really felt like he maximized, or maybe it was even one of those top guys that you're expecting a lot from, but just somebody that maximized under coach there?
So one that followed him to Georgia, Tyke Smith, was a guy, he was a freshman All-American. So that's one of those top end talent guys you're talking about that he continued to elevate, because he played the spear safety position, but at West Virginia, when they practice, when they split up and do position groups, the spear goes with the cornerback. So he would practice with the cornerbacks coach, not the safeties coaches. So to see Addae working with Tyke Smith and turning him into the player that he is, and helping him elevate from a freshman All-American to darn near, a regular All-American, was impressive. And then Drayshawn Miller, who was okay, he was a pretty well thought of recruit. He was once committed to LSU, but hadn't really done anything his first year, was injured, was kind of out of sight, out of mind as far as West Virginia fans were concerned. And then he came right in and he was playing almost at an all conference level, right in his first full year of being healthy. So I think that, there's your two ends of the spectrum. He took a top player and made him better, took a guy that was out of sight and made him good. So he's got that talent.
And certainly for any coaches, that's kind of their number one job, right? To get the most out of the players, to maximize their play, whatever kind of talents they are. A lot with, obviously, with coaching at a high level, that Power 5 conference level, is their recruiting ability. What can you say? What kind of recruiter was he? What is he? Maybe anything that stands out to you on the recruiting trail with him?
Well, he certainly connects with players. I mean, when you talk to recruits, I mean, you and I both talk to recruits, and they like and respect guys that have been there before, that have done it at a high level. And that's what Addae has done as a player as well. So that means something to them. And then the fact that he's able to go, as you went over his kind of resume before, West Virginia, Arizona, Michigan, Minnesota, he's recruited everywhere in the country in all levels, kind of all conferences. And he hasn't been stuck to, hey, I'm at a new school, so I'm going to recruit, but I'm still recruiting the same region. When he went to Arizona, he just started recruiting Las Vegas. And he'd never recruited Las Vegas before, but it didn't matter. He made connections there, had a lot of recruits there. When he went from Arizona to Minnesota, those Las Vegas recruits were interested. He kept them going, had a couple more go to Minnesota with him. So I think he does a nice job of adapting his recruiting style to different areas of the country as well, instead of just, hey, I specialize in recruiting this area and nowhere else.
So he gets those 2 years. I touched on, obviously, just West Virginia. Then he goes to Georgia in 2021. Obviously, a big year for Georgia, certainly winning the title. But just, Chris, kind of when you look back on his career, is this a guy that you kind of have grown to expect that he's a coach on the rise, to essentially maybe from when he was a player to have this rise that he's had as a coach, to have the success that he's had?
He's always seemed like a smart player. When he was at West Virginia, he seemed like a smart player. And then, as you noted, went through the ranks. I think those first couple of years when he was Michigan, Arizona, that's the same path as Rich Rodriguez, and some of those other coaches from West Virginia. So he had connections there, and then kind of branched out on his own and made an impression on guys. And so, yeah, watching that natural progression from standout player to GA to position coach to kind of a coordinator, co-coordinator at a lot of places, it does make sense.
So Miami gets, with Daryl Porter Jr., the cornerback, transfer there at West Virginia for 2 seasons, has that breakout year in 2021 after playing a little bit the year before, 46 tackles, interceptions, 6 pass breakups. Just simply put, and we'll get into the type of player he is, but just kind of impressions of him, maybe where he took the biggest leap from year 1 to 2.
I mean, here's the big connection here, and why it's so interesting seeing him going with Addae is because he brought that Addae mentality to the secondary. As I mentioned a minute ago, that 2021 defense had a problem with guys catching the ball in front of them and then trying to make a play after the catch. And Porter was the opposite of that. He was opposite Nick Troy Fortune, who was the guy I'm referring to, kind of laying back a little bit. But Porter was the guy that went after it, and for better and worse. You know, he was one of the tops on the team in pass breakups, one of the tops in interceptions. He also gave up, I think, the second most touchdowns and more, not as many yards after the catch because he was there, he was in there in position, but his guys were making deep catches. So he is up and down, but he's a redshirt freshman. And the thing is, he has been on the coach's mind, on the coach's tongues, I guess, since the moment he stepped on campus. When he was a true freshman, arrived in the summer, and during that first August camp, it was, man, this Daryl Porter guy, he just got here, but he led the team in interceptions all throughout fall camp. And they were like, at some point, it has to do with your production on the field. Now, they had 3 veterans at that time, so it was going to be hard for him to kind of step right into a starting role as a true freshman. And they really wanted to try to preserve that 4-game thing with him. And so he didn't get as big of a role as maybe he could have or should have if eligibility didn't matter. But yeah, the coaches have been high on him since the moment he stepped on campus. So
did it start even before that? Do you remember when he was a recruit, was there something that you felt like that they saw early on as a recruit that he had a chance to kind of be a top guy, or is it one of those ones where, you know, you kind of find out when he gets here?
Now, this was one that they were excited about as recruiting. I remember it was Travis Trickett, who is now at USF as the offensive coordinator. He was West Virginia's South Florida recruiter. Obviously, Addae helped him out down there with that being his position. But that was one that they were excited about, that they thought that they had kind of stolen from out under. I don't know how hard Miami recruited him, but kind of one of those guys that was under the radar down in South Florida that the quote unquote big 3 kind of passed on, I assume, for the most part, and that West Virginia was able to just steal him away. So they were feeling pretty good about him even back in high school.
Yeah, and certainly. And then, he had options. He picks Miami, LSU, FSU, Oregon, were other schools involved and interested in him. You touched on a kind of up and down this past year. His upside, again, a guy with still plenty of eligibility left, maybe where you could see if things all work out for him, where can he get to? What will be some of the keys he needs to improve on to kind of, like we talked about earlier, maximizing what he is as a player?
He's got to do the weight room, which you think about a lot, especially with defensive backs that are freshmen. He's got to get a little bit bigger. I know that was one of the negatives of that first year. And again, he's 3 months removed from high school. I think they're all pretty scrawny 3 months removed from high school, so that's okay. But that's probably the biggest thing for him. And then just kind of hammering down, trying to find that fine line between being aggressive and being out of control. Again, one of the tops on the team in pass breakups, but also one of the tops on the team in touchdowns allowed. So it's the good with the bad, and you take it with cornerbacks. You always tell them, forget about that last play, make the next one. And he's good at that, but trying to find that fine line as he gets older and gets more mature.
Was there a game that stands out to you with him? Again, just kind of looking at stats and some of the grades by Pro Football Focus kind of has them, but is there anything that stands out to you, either a game, a performance that he had this past season in your mind?
Well, that TCU game, obviously that's when he had the interception. So that's something that has an impact. And he not only had an interception, but had a return, which is, I think, a forgotten part of the defense. I can't remember exactly how long of it, but it was half the field. And that changes everything. And that was a game that I believe at the time was a 6-point game, and he picks off that pass. And next thing you know, that almost seals it for West Virginia, or puts them in darn good position to end up winning that game. So came through when it mattered. Didn't feel, oh, hey, I got a pick, now I'm good. It continued to play and really flipped the field and helped West Virginia.
And certainly always looking for playmakers. Chris, I definitely appreciate your time with the insight. You're always crushing it up there with your coverage on West Virginia. So I definitely had to have you on short notice, but you did it, and I appreciate you. So keep up the good work. And like I said, thanks again.
Hey, thanks for having me on.